Greater Than 0% is a 501c3 nonprofit that's on a mission to share stories of organizations from around the world that are changing lives. We have weekly episodes featuring amazing nonprofits and monthly episodes interviewing top business executives. You can find us at gtzp.org on your preferred streaming or social media platforms.
Thanks everybody for tuning into this episode of Greater Than 0%. In this episode, we are interviewing Arnold Westphal, who is the Executive Director and Workshop Presenter at Breakthrough for Men. Arnold, thank you so much for your time today.
Good morning, Joseph. I'm really happy to be here.
All right. So per usual, we like to start these episodes with the mission statement of the organizations we're interviewing. So what is a mission of Breakthrough for Men?
The mission is men supporting men to uncover aliveness and lead more fulfilling lives. We share, we listen, we learn together. And that really encapsulates sort of what we do. We're not a teaching, we're not a fixing, we're not an organization that's here to help something that's broken. We're here to help men get tools to live with more aliveness, more authenticity, and through that to deepen the relationships in their lives, starting with the relationship with themselves.
All right. I have questions, but before I get to those, why you? Why is this something that you have wanted to spend your time on and dedication towards?
Well, I found myself nearing the end of my 40s, sort of wondering what the hell life's about. You know, what's going on? Why am I doing this grind every day? And realizing that I had an underlying sense of disconnection from the people I cared about. And as I sought to work through that, I came across the Breakthrough community here in Monterey, California, where I grew up and had seen them advertised for years, never really knew what it was about. And what I uncovered when I joined the workshop was a set of tools and practices to help me get in touch with myself, to help me learn how to appreciate myself more, how to appreciate other men in the world more, and how to start to have really good connections with people that mattered. And through that, it transformed every aspect of my life. My familial relationships all improved. In fact, the relationships of other people in my life, through my change of how I interact with them, their ancillary relationships have improved. So for example, my brothers and sisters all have better relationships because I'm showing up differently in the family. And that's proved true in my workplace, that's proved true in my intimate relationships, and it's proved true in my friendships. And I've also seen that pattern repeated with the other men who've taken the program. And so for me, it came about to become a calling. I realized the power of helping men live more authentically and more from a place of love every day, what that could do for them in their lives and the people that they really care about. And I started to see the power of the small change. One person can impact a circle of people that can impact another circle of people that can impact, and pretty soon we're impacting the greater community and we're impacting the world one person at a time. I felt completely called to that. So I've changed my career path. I've really dedicated myself to this. It took 2 years out to learn to present the workshop, and have been now presenting it for 2 years, and stepped into the executive director role this January. I'm just really happy to be curating this beautiful work forward.
All right. I feel like this is like a secret group that I've never heard of, or people have never heard of. And there's like mysticism around this. So like, talk to me about Breakthrough for Men, the workshop. And you said these tools and practices that you've gained. And maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, and maybe we could talk a little bit about the history, which is pretty long. But maybe starting there would make a lot of sense, of 1987 being the initiation and founding. Yeah.
So 1987, for context, I was a senior in high school, and which is, a bit of a throwback for me.
Yeah.
A gentleman named Fred Jealous, who is a teacher and counselor, came back from a Peace Corps run and teaching overseas in rural Turkey. And what he found there was a community of men that was more intimate, that was more emotionally intimate, that was more physically intimate. It's not uncommon for men to hold hands It's not uncommon for men to walk arm in arm. It's not uncommon for men to greet each other with a kiss on the cheek. It's not uncommon for men to have closeness. And it's not uncommon for men to share emotional closeness. And when he came back to America from that trip, he was struck by the isolation and separation that we have in our culture, by the go it alone, do it alone, by the male programming of you got to conquer, you got to be the best. I hate to quote Talladega Nights, but Ricky Bobby, if you're not first, you're last. I mean, it's funny, and yet that underlying sentiment can creep through all of our culture. So he noticed this gap. He noticed the suffering that isolation caused. And he started to do something about it, creating a program called Options for Men with 6 people in his living room. And over the course of time, that grew to 12, that grew to 20. Oh, now he started to train people to teach the material as well. So over 30 years, it evolved into what is now a 26-week workshop. And it was taught in person. So you had to enroll, you had to go to the location and sit in person. In 2020, in the great toilet paper crisis of 2020, all of a sudden we had 3 workshops going. I was sitting on a team for one, and we didn't know what to do. And a couple of us raised our hands and said, let's try Zoom. Let's see what we can do to keep delivering this workshop. Mm-hmm. And it worked wonderfully. The men dropped in. They really got to their work. And I'll get to how we do the work, the sort of the nuts and bolts of it in a minute. But when we pivoted, all of a sudden we started promoting online. And what we found was interest from all across the country. So over the course of the last 2 years, we've been teaching this virtual workshop, and we now have graduates in 12 different states, and we're reaching out to people all over. So our mission suddenly blew up.
Right.
And it wasn't just about being here in Monterey. We now have an opportunity to help men all over the country. We just did our annual weekend together on the 25th through the 27th. And we had a gentleman fly out from Brooklyn who was a recent graduate. So we are now touching lives all over the place. For me, that means how do we broaden our mission and keep our core competency, which our core competence has always been this live workshop. We've now got that expanded to the virtual workshop where we support men to come in 4 times during that workshop to an in-resident session for day-longs. We have provided support for them on travel, support on lodging arrangements. We do everything we can to make it happen. And then we also provide a virtual option if they can't come together. And so that's one track. We're going to keep that track. And we're also bringing back our full in-person workshops. So if you're within a driving radius of the Monterey Peninsula or Santa Cruz, California, you can come in. And that really covers a pretty broad swath of territory from, if you're familiar with California, from San Jose and the southern San Francisco Bay Area all the way down to southern Monterey County, which is about a 200-mile stretch. So there's a lot of local people who can come into this and still get it locally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how we've expanded. And it was a wonderful shift. Our presenters learned to teach it a new way. We've embraced technology. We're using an online platform now to deliver the content, deliver the materials. It started out, we were emailing everything to everybody once a week. And over the last 2 years, we've really got it streamlined to where we're ready to continue to deliver twice a year a digital workshop to anybody anywhere in the country.
Wow. All right. I've noted down here tons and tons of questions. So maybe we could start by, oh man, where should I start? Why men? This is something that we wanted to talk about initially. So breakthrough for men. It's not for people, for women, for children. It's for men. Why was that the focus? And I think you touched on it initially, with the inception 30 years ago of the experience in Turkey versus US. But yeah, let's start there.
So it's really a lot of different factors. The workshop developed sort of out of the work of Pia Mellody and early codependency work. And then also the Robert Bly, the male archetype, and how men have different aspects to ourselves. Some of them we are taught to bring out sort of our strength, our power aspects, but some of those aspects, our creativity, our caring, our sensitivity, are not focused on in the U.S. culture. And, by U.S., we're talking about Western European culture coming over here.
Right.
The male role, particularly for white males, has always been, you're in charge, you got to be on top, you got to perform, There's no room for error. You got to do it alone. There's all these messages that guys have gotten over the years, and men have gotten. You don't show feelings. You certainly don't cry. You don't want to be soft. You don't want to be emotional. Our introductory night for the workshop, we do this great little piece where we go, okay, I'm going to pretend I'm from another planet. And we get the whiteboard out and we say, write down everything a man must do and everything a man must not do. You know, explain to me as an alien what it is to be a man. Mm-hmm. And the lists have been the same since we started.
Yep.
You must make money. You must provide. You must be strong. You must be brave. You must do for others. You must not cry. You must not show fear. You must not show weakness. So you must be perfect. You must do it right. All these things come out. And what that does to men is it creates a pressure cooker. Creates a pressure cooker that a person will go through their life with strategies they develop in early childhood on how to cope with this environment, how to cope with this learning. And there's this tipping point that happens when boys start to enter puberty, and you can see it in children even anywhere you look. Young boys are very tactile with each other. They're friendly. I can remember growing up, I didn't meet a kid that my arm wasn't around him, that we weren't wrestling. We weren't, in physical contact as buddies, as friends. As soon as puberty hits, all of a sudden touch becomes, is this sex? Is this a thing? You start to get teased, you start to get pressured around that, and we lose our connection with each other. And the isolation starts to set in. So all these factors combine. When we work with men to uncover their loving heart, to uncover their nature, to uncover their joy, what happens is all those parts that everybody wants us to show start becoming readily accessible. The pressure to be the thing all the time goes away, and we can start to drop into how are we interacting with others? How are we impacting others? Not just from a perspective of, am I meeting my responsibility? But am I encouraging and inviting everyone else to be as loving, as contributory, as fully authentic as they can be? And so we focus on men because as men, that's the story we know. There is a parallel program in town that does a women's program based on the same curriculum, because women learn a different set of rules that they operate by. So that's why we focus on men. We're not qualified. I'm not qualified as the guy to talk to a woman about what cultural conditioning she might have learned. But I can listen to men and I can talk to men about it.
Yeah.
There's one other aspect I'll point out, which is really key. Because our mission is we listen, we share, we learn together. When you put men in a room and you give them permission, you create a safe, confidential environment where we can talk about the things that bother us. We can talk about the things we feel where we haven't measured up enough in our life, whatever that might be, or ways we showed up that we just didn't like, whether they were extreme or whether they were small. When you share that in a group of other men and a person receives back acceptance and non-judgment and not fixing of it, but just simply allowing the feelings to come through, all of a sudden there's safety interacting with men. And there's a deep core here where as men, we are afraid of each other. We're afraid of each other's judgment. We're afraid of each other's power. We want people to be on our side. We certainly don't want to be perceived and judged as something that wouldn't match up to what maleness is. So when men can share vulnerably and then be met with acceptance, it opens up the door for everybody to participate and for everybody to actually start to look at, wow, okay, I can be with these feelings without needing to do something to fix it or get something to fix it or to try to be something I'm not to fix it. Suddenly, you know what? I can feel maybe I'm a little uncertain in this moment. I have a little fear coming up in this moment. Oh, my relationship's getting serious and I just didn't learn the language to talk about this. It feels too vulnerable to say to my partner, I'm just feeling a little frustrated or a little scared and I don't know how to talk to you about it, but can we try to have a conversation, right? These kinds of things to empower men to be a little vulnerable in their life and understand that we're enough to meet the moment. It's not based on the Stoic philosophy, but to me, it very much lines up with what the Stoics talk about the world can come to meet us, and we're enough for it, and we can have our feelings around that.
Yeah. Okay. I feel like this is just the history, the progression over the past few decades of kind of the stereotypes of masculinity and the pressure being put on men has decreased a little bit. I don't think it, for at least my firsthand experience, I think it's much more socially acceptable now to have open, honest, vulnerable conversations, even in a public setting, than it used to be. But it still sounds like there's a lot of people that go through your workshops and programs. So I'm wondering kind of how historically that's been progressing, where we're at, what does the desired future end state look like, and see, that's kind of, I guess, the overall thought and question.
I love it. That's a great point. And in fact, I'm working through the same thing here now. I don't believe the process has changed. I just believe there's now a new acceptable level of public vulnerability. There's still a level of vulnerability behind that. There's still a level of honesty and authenticity behind that.
Right.
So now it's socially okay for me to be with my buddies and shed a tear, or say I'm struggling in my relationship, or say, I'm struggling at work and I'm concerned I'm not doing enough, or whatever that's right. We have that ability to check into this far, but there's still always something beyond that.
Right.
And what happens is we're taught really well how to move ourselves into some form of practice to medicate feelings, whether it's going to our digital device, whether it's food, whether it's exercise, whether it's working more, whether it's alcohol or drugs, whatever it might be. We're really good at, let me get out of this feeling. Okay, I'll do something. We're not taught still the deeper process of being actually intimate. So if I have an acceptable level of vulnerability that I can show you, I will show you that. Great. And I won't feel nervous. But where men start to do their work and where they can really impact their relationships is when they move into that next step and actually move through what we call, there's a helplessness and hopelessness piece that comes along. And I know it's still showing up because statistically, males, middle-aged, are one of the highest risk groups for suicide. And the reason is because this whole premise is based on psychology and the foundation that as we grow up, we have events in our life and our core family units that happen that we adapt to through behaviors. And those adapting behaviors become coping mechanisms. And those coping mechanisms work most of the time until people reach about middle life, late 30s to early 50s. And all of a sudden, those coping mechanisms aren't working. And you can get a sense of stuckness. You can get a sense of stagnation. And you can get a real strong sense of disconnection. And that's when people start to go, wow, I'm just not showing up in my life the way I want to. And it's impacting the people I love. And so that's where it's still present. We do a lot of listening. That's why listening's in our mission statement, because we're constantly getting feedback to see how is this story showing up now versus what it was 30 years ago. Certainly this environment, and in fact, I met with the founder, had lunch with our founder yesterday with Fred, and we were talking about this very thing, that there's a lot of cultural acceptance now of gender, of sexual preference, and to show feelings. That just wasn't present in 1987 when I went to high school, and has gradually been increasing. And we still see this sense of isolation coming. Even more so now that people have gotten more into being on screens, like you and I. So we would be having a very different experience of this conversation if we were in person. I'd be interacting with you energetically as well as verbally.
Right.
And it would be a different experience. So our connection through this digital medium, while it's fantastic, is becoming a replacement in some cases for the actual physical connection, actually being with people. So all of this is to just lead to when a person, and as a male, can get into the idea that expanded relationships, living from love, feeling emotionally safe all the time. Now I'm better at performing. I'm better at showing up for my work. I'm better at showing up for my family. I can impact my community more. I'm better at showing up for my children. We teach a lot about recognizing our family behavior patterns. And all of the men that go through the program who are fathers, almost to a man, comment how much better they're doing with their children, how much better they are to support them through their growth process. People who do caretaking, people who have partners that are going through crisis. Now my boundaries are good. I don't have to mesh with you anymore. I can hold you and support you without taking it on personally. And it really has dramatically impacted person's abilities to support others in their community.
Have there been some so you said, again, going back to the tools, the tools that you mentioned that you've gained through this process, and that are taught during the workshop. One of the things that I think you mentioned is learn the language to talk about this. I think learning the language and learning how to have these conversations is definitely, in my brain at least, like one of those tools that can be used. That me, for example, too, I probably have not had many of these types of conversations. And so because I haven't had that many conversations, I don't maybe know how to start them or how to progress them or what to ask or how to initiate. So it sounds like that's an example of a tool that can be learned through the workshop. But I'd love to hear more golden eggs or topics that are discussed that aren't typically in the tool belt of men today.
Sure.
Yeah.
So there's this old analogy out in the world, and I think a lot through 12-step programs, things that take $100 bill. It's nice and crisp, and then crush it up, throw it in the street, step on it, walk on it, get it dirty, pick it up, still worth $100. And so I call that the bill is inherently worth $100. We do a piece in the early part of the workshop on our inherent nature as people. And we take men back to that place of, as I was born. And the exercise goes something like this, where you just are invited to make some statements. And I'll preface here, every activity in this workshop, men are at choice. Mm-hmm. We do some very specific things. We establish confidentiality day one. What's said in the workshop stays in the workshop. What you see in the workshop stays in the workshop. We establish that you're at choice for everything you do. So if there's an exercise that comes up and we're going someplace the person doesn't want to go, they could say, I'm going to opt out of this. Or, that's not working for me. Can I talk about this thing that is coming up for me? And we allow them. So it's really their time.
Right.
Even when we get to things like, it sounds silly, but teaching men how to hug. Yep. And how to ask and how to ask and then learn their yeses and nos. As men, we often will say yes when we mean no because we got to do the job. We feel responsible or they're counting on me. So I wanted to start with that. That's a big part of how we do this. We don't allowing a person to be autonomous and feel in control and choose into these things is really important, because otherwise, if someone participates in something under duress or because they feel like obligated to do it, it's not going to have any meaning. It's just something they're doing. So some of the things we do, we'll start with inherent nature. I might say in the workshop, there's a phrase, as I was born, I was enough. As I was born, I was worthy and deserving of love. As I was born, I was precious. And so we have some statements like this, and you would not believe how challenging it is for some men to say, I'm worthy of love. So, and now I might get misty in some of this just because it really matters in my life. But there's performance is so big for men. And I talk a lot about our emotional intelligence and our being able to have conversations, but really one of the core components is getting men out from this crushing. You either perform perfectly or, there's nothing between first and last. You're a winner or you're a loser. And men can harbor and build senses of not being enough through their life to where they have this thing called imposter syndrome, particularly later in their career. They're high earning, they're doing well, and all of a sudden they feel like they're just worried all the time. I spoke to a gentleman a few weeks ago. We had a little campfire circle. We were talking. Highly successful, hugely successful human being, talking about how he feels like he's not enough. And in his world, didn't have anybody to share that with, because in that echelon, There's no one to talk to. There's no one to say I'm having these feelings. So to get a man to drop in and say, as I was born, I was precious. As I was born, I was enough. We establish a foundation of worth. We establish a foundation of value that has nothing to do with performance. Interestingly enough, you'll never know what anybody does for a living in the workshop. You'll never know what anybody earns in the workshop.
Yeah.
It's just not covered. In fact, I can show you how we introduce ourselves in the workshop if you'd like to play along with me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So what we'll do is we'll say our name. We'll say when we first got in contact with Breakthrough. So for me, it will be when I started the workshop. For you, it would be 15 minutes ago. And we say one thing we loved to do as a child.
Yep.
So I would say, hi, I'm Arnold Westphal, and I first took the Breakthrough Workshop in 2018. And one of the things I loved to do as a boy was to go out in the backyard with my German Shepherd and have him lay down, and I'd lay back and use him as a pillow and look up at the clouds.
Yeah.
And feel this big dog just breathing underneath me. Just totally, I could spend hours in the afternoon with that.
Yeah. Wow. All right. My turn. My name is Joseph Smalzer. I first got introduced and engaged with Breakthrough 15 minutes ago. And one thing I loved to do when I was a child, I feel like there's a lot of things, but a couple of the things that I vividly remember doing are climbing trees and literally never getting out of them, playing Legos for 5+ hours, not even realizing the clock has taken that long. And your example of your dog reminded me of my cat Snuggles, who I loved very, very much when I was a kid, and I'd love to snuggle with her in bed before going to sleep every night. So
awesome.
Yeah.
I love it. And there we go. Now we're two people.
Yep.
Now I could talk to you about my cats. Now we can talk about trees. Now all of a sudden we just connected.
And is the usual like introduction, like heavy with men, like heavy on the career focus, on the whatever other examples? Is that typically kind of the initial conversations, or does it kind of just depend on the interaction?
Well, it sort of depends on where you're at and what situation you're in.
Right.
But what I notice is when we greet people out in the world and we don't know each other, it's what do you do?
Yeah.
Hi. So, hey, Joseph. So, what do you do? Well, but that's not who you are.
Right.
Unless someone like you who has got their career aligned with their personal mission, which is great. And that's one of the things that's why I'm turning this direction, because to me, oh my goodness, to help people move out of a constraining personal storyline, whatever that storyline might be.
Yep.
Right. For me, it was a lot of self-judgment, but for other people, it would be different things. However, most of us experience some sort of story of who we are that limits our choices to our perception, that limits our action to some degree.
Right.
And so as men, we start with your inherent value, and we start with connecting on a way that really, and it's so beautiful to see 20 guys go around the room with what they did as a little boy. Because all of a sudden, who all the skateboarders were, the surfers were, and all of a sudden they're just looking at each other. Whereas 2 minutes ago, we were all standing against the wall at the 8th grade dance, trying to like this. So we connect, we establish our value, and then we do a series of pieces, starting with inner family systems, what the definition of childhood trauma is. I mean, some psychologists will say your first trauma was the minute the bottle got taken away from you, or the minute, your mom closed the door for the first time and you were in the crib, or the minute you cried. So we go back and we look at family systems from an objective perspective. And then we have worksheets where, you might say, okay, these were the events that happened in my childhood that still leave a mark for me.
Yeah.
And we put those into perspective of, so in my household, I learned to entertain early. That kept me safe. That kept my emotional needs met. That kept the environment felt more predictable as a child. So as an adult, that shows up in ways that work and ways that don't work. The ways they don't work, it shows up as sarcasm. It shows up maybe as snarkiness. It shows up as joking a lot. When people are talking about something serious, maybe I'm making a joke to feel comfortable. That doesn't work for them, right?
Right.
On the plus side, it shows up that I'm comfortable talking to people. I'm comfortable emotionally engaging with people. I'm comfortable teaching. I'm comfortable in front of a room. I'm comfortable speaking. So there's a benefit to that. So we teach not only, well, here's how we adapted, but here are the benefits of those things. And I don't care what your adaptation was, even if your adaptation was an addiction. There was a time when the environment was such that that addiction was the thing you needed to feel safe in that moment. And now you're at a point where we can deal with it together. We can talk about it together.
Right.
Because keeping ourselves alive is what our amygdala wants us to do. And when we get down to that level of self, all we're really trying to do is get our needs met. And one of the tools we teach is there's 5 aspects to what we call love in action. And this was written by an author named David Rico. You can look him up. He's written lots of books on psychology, friend of the program. But they're called the 5 A's: attention, acceptance, appreciation, affection, and allowing. We cover those over 5 weeks, one at a time. What it means to give those internally, and then what it means to bring them out to our families and our communities. And that's the second half of the workshop. So we go through the whole first half and we learn about how we got where we are today. And we look at our lives and we go, what's working, what's not working? Sometimes guys show up, everything looks great, they just want more. How do I live more deeply? There's a poem, and I don't know if it's Frost or Yeats or one of the classics, but he says, I want to live deep and suck all the marrow of life. So how do we actually do that when we have constraints on us? And how do we empower ourselves to actually live and give in a way that matters to us?
Right.
So when we look at the intersection of that, of giving ourselves love first, because you can't give away what you don't have. So by breaking these aspects down, attention, acceptance, appreciation, affection, allowing, we can start to go, okay, where do I give myself attention? We'll start with that. Am I giving myself attention? Am I listening to the cues in my life? They're telling me, I can look at that. This could be a little better. You know what? That interaction didn't work for me. Am I giving myself the attention? Then I can give it outward. Now, when I listen to you, I can listen to you not thinking, well, what am I going to say next? Or how does I compare to this gentleman across from me? But I can listen to you as a person and appreciate what you're saying from the point of view of your life. Oh, wow, isn't that fascinating? And I can start to ask some questions. Well, tell me more about that. That's really amazing. I can appreciate you. If you were to, and I were sitting at a cocktail party talking, and we did the usual, what do you do for work? What do you do? Whichever of us has got more zeros on the paycheck, it can be a thing with the other person. That just happens with guys, Oh, well, we just came back from our summer home and we're doing this, and my 3rd kid's going to Harvard and I'm paying for the whole thing, and all, blah, blah, blah. When that can happen, we start comparing, we start measuring. All of a sudden I'm less than, someone else is more than. And
Right.
It's that less than, more than dynamic that we're trying to break up right there. So by focusing on feelings, by focusing on listening, and now I can appreciate you if you're doing well. There's this whole idea behind abundance, that abundance flows through us, and actually not judging another's abundance.
Right.
When we have
right.
judgment on something else, we shut it down.
Yeah.
So by working through this, by getting to accepting and allowing, wow, now suddenly I can appreciate you. I can admire that quality in you that got you there. And I can say to myself, hey, how can I incorporate that in my life?
Yeah.
Suddenly I can grow and expand as a result of it. And I'll hit back on the why men question, because this is where it really, for me, lands. Now I can show up better for the women in my life. Now I can show up better for the children in my life, whether they're my children, my nieces, my nephews, my colleagues' children in general. Now I can show up better for people in need. Now I can show up and actually feel comfortable. Many of the men start to volunteer and do service projects out in the world. I can go, oh, wow, my mom, my sister, I can interact with them in more meaningful ways. And in the workplace, we stop seeing women as objects. We stop seeing women as other than. We start seeing them as, oh, they're complements. We're complements to each other. It's not a man versus woman world. It's a man and woman world. It's a human and human world. Let's take gender out of it. It's a human and human world. And whatever I'm seeing as a difference in that other person, honestly, is only my perception. So it's a big piece of this is when we learn to value ourselves, we inherently learn to value others. And that's sort of the lovely part of it. The workshop takes 26 weeks, as I said. Now, online, it takes 32 because we broke the sessions up differently.
Right.
The reason it takes so long is because it's practice building. It's literally going to the dojo once a week and learning how to be with yourself in a way that informs you more about who you are, where you come from, and whatever it is that you want to address, we've got a tool and an appropriate mechanism to use to work through it. And then we provide you community. So the last piece of what we do is we provide community. We do check-ins. You have partners every week, different people in the course that you're going to be interacting with. I still to this day have a phone support partner 3 days a week.
Yeah.
We check in, and it's real simple. It's what's going well, what's a challenge, how can you appreciate yourself in this moment, and what's a good next step. And to ask yourself those questions a couple times a week and have somebody listen without fixing is really valuable.
Yeah.
Because I don't know about you, but stuff comes up in my life all the time.
Yeah. And I'm one absolutely that always jumps to the fixing mindset versus just really focusing on listening and understanding. So yeah, absolutely. Wow. This sounds like an amazing workshop. Go ahead. It's
wonderful. And it's one aspect of what is called men's workout in the world. So, in 2020, we had to go digital. We started to expand our mission. What I started looking at, I was on the board of directors for 2 years prior to stepping into this role, is who else is doing men's work and how are they doing it? Because I don't know, and it's hard to find. I'm so busy day to day, like keeping everything running. We run a very tight budget. The workshops are not cheap to put on. We don't charge a set tuition. This is another key component of Breakthrough. Our mission is that we allow men to take this workshop regardless of their financial situation. Everybody's payment is considered a pledge, not a tuition. And when a person enrolls in the workshop, we have an enrollment manager that works with them to make it affordable for what they can pay. Right. And we allow payment plans. So we'll have some guys took 3 years to pay for it. We don't tell anybody what the total dollar amount, right? And we don't tell anybody what your arrangements are. And what that does, it allows people who want to do the work to do the work. And it allows us to serve sectors of the economy because there's a lot of workshops out there for personal growth. And, from Tony Robbins on down the line to local ones. Right. And they're very popular right now. There's a lot of psychologists out there who are starting to develop. You see them on TikTok and on YouTube, and they're great, and they do these little modules, but they're not cheap. And one of the things we've done, and we continue to stand by, is that anybody can participate in this workshop if they're willing to do it. Right. We'll grant everything from full scholarships to partial scholarships. We know what the cost is. We'll tell you that when you go to enroll, and then we'll let you make a decision on how much you can afford or what works for you. If the workshop doesn't work for you, a person can drop out at any time. We really mean it when we say you're at choice. If you say this isn't working for me, we're going to go, great, stop payments. It's not, we're not a money collecting organization at all. We could do better at that, and we're learning to do better at that. But it just has never been that focus. And so it's really important people understand that what we do is we make this accessible to everybody. And literally nobody ever pays enough to cover the cost for their seat in the workshop. Right. We have an alumni association that makes continuing monthly donations. We're looking for, and I know there's a part where we'll get to the ask bit of it. Yeah. But, we're looking for small donations. And we're currently working to start to break the workshop down into modules. So, for example, you talk about communication. We have a great worksheet on how to have conversations with each other in a relationship, how to bring something that you're holding back, that you feel upset about, how to come and talk to somebody about something where you didn't show up the way you'd like. From something as simple as, if I was late today, I'd go, hey, Joseph, I really have to come clean about something with you, right? And then there's a process, and it's very simple. It's nothing new. Psychologists use these tools all the time, but it's a great way to start a conversation. So we're looking at making some of these modules available as shorter courses, as video content. We're now moving into that, and that's sort of where we're at now. We realized after 2 years what we can do, and so now I'm working to get resources together to do that.
Right.
We have a filmmaker on our board of directors. He's ready to go. We've got people who can write content. We have all those pieces. We just need the funds right now to make that next step happen. And then we can really start to provide more benefit to people outside of the local area, other than just the workshop, because it's a big ask. It's 31 weeks, 7 months out of the year. It's a one night a week. It's a big ask. I want to deliver more modular pieces to people out in the world, so that your audience members can go, oh, wow, I can get that. And that men can find a place where they can drop in and connect. One of the big things I want to do is have conversation available. Yep. So you could drop in. We have one on Monday nights right now that's always going, but it's on Pacific time. We just ran a workshop that started early for East Coast participants. We're going to run things in different time zones, but my real mission is to make this content available to people everywhere, because I know the power of how it impacts families, and I know what it can do for people when we move out of what's holding us back to allow us to live more fully from our hearts.
Well, I think we're a bit over time here, which is totally fine, but I want to make sure we touch on all the main points.
I'm a
here.
talker.
No. This is great. This is great. I think this is a point that we need to have another one at some point. But people that are listening and want to get engaged, obviously there's an opportunity for them to apply to be a part of the workshop. Is there any other type of engagement that you look for? You mentioned donations on a monthly basis.
I'm looking for several things. One, I'm looking to find out about other men's work. I really want to know what other programs are out there. And so I can talk to them and see, what they're doing and share what we're doing. A huge part of this is my personal mission is to expand on what this word masculinity is in all different age groups, cultural groups, race groups. How do we cross-pollinate with each other? Because there's bigger issues under all of this. We can talk about gender issues. We can talk about sexuality issues. We can talk about race relations. We can do all these things. And it all goes back to, if we see each other as people and not as other, if we understand that we have an inherent nature, and this is my personal story. I can remember the day I was sitting in the backyard of my house thinking about my inherent nature, working through this problem of, as I was born, I was enough. As I was born, I deserved love. And it hit me all of a sudden, if that's true for me, and it's true for the other men in my class, it has to be true for everyone. It must be true for everyone, or it's not true at all.
Right.
And suddenly I realized all the people in my life who I was holding grudges against, all the people in my life who I felt had harmed me, everybody deserved that same grace, deserved that same consideration. And what happened was I stopped being angry. I went and healed the relationships that mattered to me, because I was willing to say to someone who was in my family, who I had terrible relationship with my whole life, I love you. I just want you to know that I don't like the way our relationship has been going till now. It's not working for me. I appreciate you and value you, and you have my commitment to show up with love every time we interact from now on. And let what comes back come back.
Yeah.
And what that did was it transformed the relationships in my core family, not just with me, with each other. And that type of honesty transforms relationships. I've done that same similar process with different language in the workplace. Because if I'm having workplace conflict, but the other person has skills, has talents, has things I value and admire, they're deserving of love. my assumption is that they're coming from that place. Now I can go, Joseph, we've been having some friction and it really doesn't work for me. I really admire the way you do this and this and this and this, and I want to be able to collaborate with you. And for my part, I'm going to give you my commitment that I'm not going to respond to something you presented reactionarily anymore. I'll ask you questions, and I'll make sure if I need to talk to you, that we do it offline. And you can clean it up, right? And you can invite people into this new style of relationship. And if they choose out, great. If I write an email and you still reply all with a angry comment back, that's your choice.
Yep.
I've told you where I'm at. I put the invitation out. Now I can feel good about it. So that process of, and that's really what I mean about vulnerability, is the willingness to be honest with somebody and allow them, that's the fifth day, allow them to be who they are and respond, and not lose sight of their inherent value. They're still $100.
All right. Any other engagement options of people?
Yes. Thank you. Engagement. Right now, if people feel like this work is worthwhile and there's men in their life who they would like to talk to about this, please direct them to our website. They can get a hold of us anytime. While we don't have a lot of small offerings right now, I am always available to have conversations and share resources. I have plenty of things that I can pass on. And as we expand our offerings, being part of our newsletter will help you get those emails and understand how we're expanding our digital content. And small donations can, $5, $10. Starting in November of this year, there's a local event called Monterey County Gives, and there's a larger foundation that pluses up donations during that time period. So visit our website if you get behind our mission, which I hope you all do, because I guarantee you there's a man in your life right now who you can have a better relationship with and who can show up better for themselves and their whole world through this process. Share our information, give us a few bucks. And as we continue to expand, give us some connections. If you know an organization that would be aligned, even women's organizations, even children's organizations, if you have, the CASA, the court-appointed social advocate groups, the family, anything that does with families, anything to do with parenting, let them know we're here. We'd love to share resources. We've got great things. And if there's a nonprofit out there that would like to know what we do to talk about fatherhood and parenting, I'll send you our resources. I'll send you what we've got. I want to share this with everybody. So right now it's going to be on that one-to-one level. But if people can sign up and just get our information as we build out this capacity, they'll be able to do that. And if you're within 100 miles of Monterey, California, we're going to be doing local events and we're going to be doing short courses live as well. Yeah. And as we do those short courses live, we'll be creating our digital content.
Wow. All right. Well, we will be sure to share all of the links and all the social media and website information in the show notes if people that are listening want to give you a call, send you an email, learn more on the website. Yeah. But people that are listening, if this sounds like something that is relevant and you're inspired by, please reach out. There's a lot of conversations that I think aren't happening that would benefit really everyone if they were to happen, especially around masculinity and a lot of the stereotypes associated with it. So, Arnold, is there anything else that we didn't cover that you want to leave us with before we wrap it up here?
Just the one line that self-esteem is the key to loving others. And where we have a lack of love outside of ourselves, there's a place inside that we can give some attention to. And Breakthrough will help you do that.
Well, Arnold, really appreciate your time and your insights on this interview here. I learned a ton, and I'm sure a lot of people listening learned a ton. So if folks that are listening, get engaged. And Arnold, thank you so much, and have a good rest of your Thursday here.
Thank you, Joseph. Really appreciate it. Be well.
Thanks for listening to Greater Than 0%. To find more episodes or to have your organization featured on the podcast, you can find us at gtzp.org on your preferred streaming or social media platforms. Find your cause with Greater Than 0%.